Hi, this is Hayden Gaspard with Acclaim Energy. Today I'm going to be talking about the winter storm that hit Texas in February of 2021, particularly how it affected Texas's electricity grid and what changes have taken place in the years since. So, as many of you probably recall, a major winter ice storm swept the southern United States, particularly the state of Texas, in mid-February of 2021. Temperatures reached record lows all over Texas, and they were sustained for an unprecedented amount of time. In addition to the terrible effects we saw with road closures, plant and wildlife loss, and tragically with the loss of human life, the storm also had a massive negative impact on the state's electrical infrastructure. Power outages that week affected over 4.5 million homes and businesses, and in some instances that was for multiple days. As bad as the power crisis was, it could have been much worse. Officials with ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, claimed that the power grid lost so much generation that it was just seconds or minutes away from a catastrophic statewide blackout that could have lasted weeks or even months. So, after such a severe crisis that potentially could have been much worse, a lot of Texans are left wondering what caused it. Is it going to happen again? Is something being done to fix it? And how can we protect ourselves in the future? As for what caused it, you're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask, as some people have political motivation to pin the blame somewhere. The simple version is that Texas homes and businesses don't typically have much heating demand, so many of them have electric heaters. When a large portion of the state had temperatures in the teens or even approaching zero in some places, the resulting electricity demand was extremely high. The system-wide demand that week was not only higher than any winter demand in ERCOT's history, but it was higher than ERCOT had planned for in a worst-case scenario winter event. What this means is that the marginal generation scheduled to be available on call, so to speak, wasn't enough to meet the actual demand for electricity. So rolling blackouts would have to be implemented to maintain grid stability and prevent the complete blackout scenario that ERCOT feared. The one that could last weeks for the entire state. But that unplanned for demand was not the only problem. The grid instability was exacerbated by another issue with the cold, which is that a lot of the gas transportation and electricity generation equipment in the state is not properly winterized to handle temperatures as low as they got. So, in addition to a demand level that the planned supply wasn't able to meet, some of the planned supply had to shut down. Instead of having to institute rolling blackouts to reduce demand by 10% or so, which is what would have been required if all the planned supply were available, the grid operators instead had to reduce significantly more demand than that. The ensuing blackouts that were supposed to be rolling ended up affecting many for days. They forced many businesses to temporarily close, and they caused numerous deaths. This was a tragic event, and it obviously got the attention of those in charge that something needed to be done to fix it. What has been done? It's sort of hard to say. In the years since that storm, some ERCOT members have resigned. ERCOT's CEO was fired. There were new directors, CEOs, and regulators hired and appointed all over the state. The chair of Texas's Public Utility Commission was replaced, and then was replaced again a few weeks later after a controversial phone call with utility investors was leaked. There were lawsuits filed, legislation passed, new rules like Senate Bill 3 were passed. All of this was with the goal of creating new reliability standards to ensure that this would not happen again. But will it actually happen again? That's hard to say, especially this quickly. In February of 2022, there was another freeze that had a lot of Texans scared, but the grid operated fine. Granted, it wasn't as cold as it was in 2021, and the freeze didn't last as long, but that's a good sign nonetheless. And while changes have been made and more are still being implemented, a lot of power consumers are taking it upon themselves to ensure reliability by installing on-site backup generation. This has long been and remains to be the most popular way to ensure reliable power for Texans during hurricane outages or standard distribution system outages, but now Texans are being driven to it because of the fear of more winter-related outages. The number one benefit of on-site generation is obviously supplying a facility with power in the event of an outage. But there's secondary benefits to this sort of reliability solution that may become more valuable in the near future. Installing a microgrid generator system can allow facilities to become market participants via demand response programs like ERCOT's ERS. It'll allow them to implement peak management practices to reduce their billed utility costs, and in some cases, it'll allow them to export power to the grid to sell in the real-time market. Now, that's historically been a good way to generate revenue or cost savings that can help offset the purchase price of a generator for some consumers, but it has the potential to become much more lucrative in the future, With the stress that the PUC and the legislature are putting on grid resiliency, it seems likely that these emergency response programs will become better funded, which means more value to the participants. Keeping tabs on and getting ahead of these potential changes in the market is a smart move for anyone considering backup power generation, as they can change the economics of purchasing an on-site generator in favor of the customer, potentially offering much-needed reliability for a lower net cost than what we've seen in the past. This whole situation is very complex, and it's hard to fully explain it in a short podcast, but I hope you've learned something listening, or that I've at least piqued your interest in learning more. I want to thank you for listening and remind you to check back in a few weeks for another one of Acclaim Energy's All About Energy podcasts.